Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another predictions video, and in today's video I'm going to be predicting the Butler versus Jimenez fight. And so if you're new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Like the video if you do indeed like the video, and let's get straight into it. So going into this fight, Butler is 36-3 with 17 KOs, and Jimenez is 33-10-6 with 18 KOs. This fight is for the vacant IBO World Bantamweight title. Butler's last fight was a win via KO in round 2 versus Ahmed, and Jimenez's last fight was a win via TKO in round 4 versus Munoz. This is in Butler's home country of England. Butler has been pro since 2010, and so has Jimenez, both been pro since 2010. Butler's losses have come versus Inoue in 2022, Rodriguez in 2018, and Tete in 2015. Butler's losses have come versus Inoue have come versus Maloney in 2022, Yafai in 2019, Vincente in 2011, Hinjosa in 2011, Pichardo in 2011, Ramirez in 2010, Payano in 2010, Reyes in 2010, Fries in 2010, and Pichardo in 2010. And to speak a bit more about what I've just been saying there, obviously for this vacant IBO title, it's a belt in which I can't remember who had it before. I don't believe it was Inoue when he moved up to vacate all the belts, but it might have been. Nonetheless, it's a vacant belt, and for the moment, the bantamweight division is currently being destroyed by Japanese fighters, I suppose is the right way of putting it. It's just completely being dominated by them. They're really just stamping their authority on it, and obviously this isn't one of the major leading belts, but nonetheless it's still an important title, and it's an intriguing fight, this one. It's not got a big backing or anything. It's not, I believe it is shown on YouTube, but it's not, like I say, a huge fight, and it's just interesting matchmaking. It's good to see Butler being back in a world title fight. Obviously, he suffered the quite devastating defeat versus Inoue, where he was just completely broken down and pretty much destroyed, and it pretty much the whole fight was just going Inoue's way. And since then he's gone away. He's had a couple fights. He's had a couple stoppages, and they haven't really been against any wild opponents or anything, but he's built himself back up to a point in which he can say that he can deserve to fight for an IBO world title. I would probably say that he deserves to fight for a title more than that of Jimenez. Obviously, like I mentioned, this isn't one of the major titles, but Jimenez, he's coming off the win. He's had a couple wins. He went away, had a couple wins off the loss versus Maloney. It wasn't really a devastating loss versus Maloney. Same with the one versus Yafai. Neither of them were really huge losses. They were quite dominating losses, but they weren't anything too big or anything. He didn't get stopped in either of them, and it's just in between them fights. He's just not really fighting any huge names or anything, or anybody too creditable. I mean, anytime he has had a step up, he hasn't won. The kind of most notable time where he has had a step up and not lost was the Nietes draw, and even that was a draw, and Nietes was known to have quite a lot of draws, and obviously he was a world champion. So Jimenez, he's used to being the away fighter. He's used to coming in and having to go to other people's home countries and fight. And I mean, he went to Australia to fight Maloney as a prime example of that. And obviously, he doesn't normally get the nod, but we'll have to wait and see how it goes with this one. Like I mentioned, Butler, this is his first kind of return to a big time type fight. And Jimenez, obviously, he's got these losses on his record, but like I mentioned, majority of them 2011, 2010. So he's not really had many losses. I mean, he's had two losses in 13 years, if my maths is right, and so, or maybe maybe 12 years. But even then, like, he's been fighting regularly, and he's built himself a bit of a platform. Obviously, like I say, not really fighting anybody too crazy, but he's built himself, and now he's got this title fight, which I'm sure he's going to be more than up for, and he's going to probably bring the fight like he typically does, and so it's going to be an intriguing contest. To speak about them both as fighters, Butler, to start off with, I would say he sets off his jab well. He has a nice jab when he uses it, and when he's able to fight and control the pace and use his rhythm, he fights off the jab well. He can fight in the mid-range and the close range relatively well. I would say some of his straight shots are some of his best shots, but he does also go to the body well as well. He may also want the centre of the ring. I think sometimes he's willing to fight on the front foot or the back foot. I don't necessarily know when he fights on the back foot if it's always the best of ideas. Obviously against Inoue he pretty much had no choice but to fight on the back foot, and he hardly really threw at the end, and he did basically, not give up because he was destroyed, but he was just had nothing left to give, and he's very durable and tough, and he can take a shot, and he proved that against Inoue. It wasn't like a devastating knockout in the way of like he didn't go headfirst onto the canvas or anything, but he was mentally broken, and you could see that, and that is definitely going to play a factor. And it's always intriguing, especially with fighters that have fought Inoue. They've pretty much been battered majority of the time. That's what Inoue's been doing. That's the run he's on. That's why he is one of the pound for pound, if not the pound for pound best fighter. And it's just intriguing to see where they go on from there and how they can rebuild from there, and if they can rebuild, because it is mentally such a tough and draining sport. And if anything does go wrong, now you've experienced what it's like for things to go wrong, you could kind of resort back to oh, this is happening again. Let's just resort back to covering up and just hoping that it ends. And that's kind of what Butler did in the fight versus Inoue. So if things get tough in this fight, it's going to be intriguing to see how he manages to mentally deal with it. Typically, he can be quite composed and quite controlled. Like I say, this is when he has a rhythm and he's allowed to have time. That's when you see that. And he can reset quite well. He will let his hands go. He has good variation in his power. Not all his shots are crazily powerful with the combinations that he throws, but when he does sit down the shots, it mixes in well with the combinations that he's throwing. Obviously, he's fought at a top level and consistently fought at a top level, and he is, I believe, a two-time world champion, and so he's definitely been at a better level than that of Jimenez. He changes levels well in his actual striking. He's got good combinations, can fire a high tempo. He's quite accurate as well in his work, which is something I'm a fan of. And like I say, he's tough, he's durable, and can take a shot. Negatives about him, obviously he has been hurt, and like I've been mentioning, that's probably is going to play somewhat of a factor. His head is quite often on the line. He doesn't always do the best of counters. I don't think his reactions are anything too crazy. His timing isn't always anything amazing, trying to catch you when you come in. And I think Jimenez is somebody who does come in quite irrationally. And yeah, I just don't know if Butler's going to be able to get his timing down. His speed isn't anything too crazy. Arguments of his past his peak. I feel like this fight is probably going to answer if he can even be close to operating at a top level in the division anymore. Getting his opponents physically off him, I feel like it's something he can struggle with a little bit. Even in his last fight, obviously he got the early stoppage, but in the first round, Ahmed was being quite dirty, and I don't know, I just feel like Butler wasn't physically able to get him off of him, and it was the same against Inoue, he couldn't physically get him off him. He's he's against physical pressure, like I say, can kind of struggle a little bit. Making his opponents actually respect him, I think it can be a little bit of a thing. Obviously, his mindset, we're going to have to wait and see. Sometimes he can be a little bit reluctant to throw. That's an effect that can happen when you're fighting, like I've been mentioning, the likes of Inoue, and he can accept pressure on him at times. To speak about Jimenez as a fighter, he's got a good high tight guard, similar to that of Butler's, but Butler's is maybe a little bit more relaxed. But I like Butler's because he'll use his jabbing hand and then keep his other hand quite high up, which is nice to see. Jimenez straight onto the front foot a lot of the time, so he probably will be on the front foot. If Butler's going to probably want to be, but I think Jimenez is probably going to be. He goes to the body well. He carries power in his shots. He's got solid combinations. He fights in close. I feel like he definitely fights in close better than he fights at a mid range. So Butler might find success with them longer shots. He won't respect you, and so like I say, it's going to be intriguing to see how Butler does, of if it's physical or anything like that, how he actually manages to get him off of him. He will aim to respond anytime he does get caught with a shot. He's used to being the away fighter, like I mentioned. He's not being stopped at a high level, and that's something to mention. If he is going to get stopped by Butler, that would be a big statement. He is aggressive and he does turn up the tempo. He can fight at a bit of a slower pace, then turn it up, similar to that of Butler as well. To speak negatives about him, he can look uncomfortable, and his footwork and balance really isn't anything too impressive. I think, like I say, it just looks a bit uncontrolled, a bit messy, his footwork, and he does, stand quite upright, and with his lack of speed and lack of reactions that are, in my opinion, worse than that of Butler's. I just don't feel like defensive wise there's anything too good. He's definitely going to be there to be hit. He does have a lack of defensive movement. He doesn't really have much of an ability to counter. Like I say, probably worse than that of Butler's. He's lost at every step up. He's sometimes when he's just throwing out a jab, sometimes just for no reason, and it's not even landing, it's not even setting up a shot, he's literally just throwing it out. And if he's just doing that, then it's just not really any point to it. So he's actually doing something with the jab. His head's on the line quite a lot. He crosses his feet around. His punches can be quite wide as well, and that can sometimes sap the power out of them a little bit. He can be outboxed. I think Butler definitely has the technical ability higher than that of Jimenez. And weight-wise for Jimenez, he's used to being fighting at super fly. This is obviously a bantamweight, so he's moving up in weight. But in his last fight, I believe he fought a super bantamweight and he got a stoppage. So it's going to be intriguing to see how he is weight-wise and how he's dealing with the consistency of changing weight. But Butler is the favourite for this fight, and I think that Butler will win via TKO in round 5. I think Jimenez could probably catch Butler with a shot and hurt him. Maybe not hurt him, but get him on the back foot. And Butler might struggle to get him off him at times. But I think Butler is going to want to start on the front foot early on in rounds, and then if he can find success early on in rounds, then he could possibly get him out of there. Like I say, if he goes straight onto the front foot consistently with each round, then I believe he could get a stoppage. Like I say, into the earlier part of the fight in round 5. Then who he could go on to fight, I think it's going to be interesting because he isn't really with any sort of big backing or anything like that. And if he is serious about making this kind of comeback to top level fights, he's going to need big fights. But like I say, he hasn't really got a big backing at the moment, so it's going to be intriguing to see. I think a Charlie Edwards fight would be a great fight. Domestic wise, that would be a great fight, but I don't necessarily know if that would happen. But if Wasserman would be up for that, then that would be an amazing fight. Santiago, I feel like there's a couple like Santiago and Callas. I think they're two options of like just fringe world level fighters where it'd be a real tough test, but it'll be intriguing to see if Butler can actually operate at that level. But like I said, I just don't know necessarily if there's the backing or anything for Butler at the moment to get him to a fight like that, but we will have to wait and see. But yeah, that is it for today's video. I hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you didn't, like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.